Hey there, Silver Recaps here. Watch out. Late at night, a massive crowd of college students gathers on the beach, partying hard under the moonlit sky. Mitch takes charge, reminding everyone to toss their phones into a bag. No one wants embarrassing pictures or videos coming back to haunt them later. Out of nowhere, Vance and Gilbert show up with something bizarre. A ball of strange, gooey material they pulled from the ocean. Curious and excited, they suggest tossing it into the bonfire to see what happens. But before they can follow through, a heated argument breaks out over a few exchanged insults, pulling their focus away. The mysterious ball is left behind, and the party rages on until the early hours of the morning. At sunrise, Kay stirs awake beside Mitch in the lifeguard stand. Meanwhile, four of their friends groggily come to in a parked car, and Marcia, who somehow ended up on a table, wakes up just in time to vomit. As Kaylee scans the beach, an unsettling realization dawns on her. But there's something eerily wrong. The once crowded shore is now empty. There's no sign of the partygoers from the night before. Nearby, a bird flaps helplessly on the ground, struggling to move. Kay watches in horror as it suddenly sinks into the sand. Before she can process what she just saw, Mara shifts in place. Kay quickly warns her to stay still, but it's too late. Mara's feet are already trapped. She struggles, but the more she moves, the deeper she sinks. At first, their friends in the car assume she's messing with them, but the raw panic in her voice, the tears streaming down her face, this is real. Vance doesn't hesitate. Ignoring everyone's warnings, he rushes out to help. He barely takes a couple of steps before his feet sink into the sand as well. Pain shoots through him as he starts screaming. Mitch and Jonah instinctively move to help, but the girls hold them back. As Vance struggles, the sand pulls him in further. Jonah desperately tries to start the car, but the engine won't turn over. Mitch hurls a buoy attached to a rope, hoping to reach him, but it lands just out of reach. By now, Vance's face is being pulled apart, thin, thread-like strands dragging him under. In just minutes, both he and Marcia are gone. The group gathers to figure out their next move. Calling 911 isn't an option. Their phones are locked in the trunk, and with the car battery dead, Jonah still can't get the engine running. Kay cautiously lowers her hand near the sand without touching it. To everyone's shock, thin, eerie strands emerge from beneath the surface. Just then, Gilbert stirs awake. Turns out, he's been stuck inside a trash can all this time. He immediately starts cursing at his friends for ditching him, trying to climb out despite their frantic warnings. It's not until they mention that two people are already dead that he finally stops moving. Still sore from being crammed in the can all night, Gilbert groans in pain. Mitch reassures him that in a few hours the tide will shift and push him closer to them. Meanwhile, Kay pulls Mitch inside the lifeguard stand. Jonah watches the two with a jealous glare, but Shanda quietly reminds him it's time to move on. Outside, the strange strands continue to creep toward the car, slowly inching toward the tires. Kay and Mitch rummage through the lifeguard stand and find some alcohol in a cooler. With nothing else to do, they start drinking, trying to pass the time. Hours go by, but no one shows up. The sun climbs higher and the heat becomes unbearable. Inside the car, the others do their best to shield themselves with a towel. Eventually, Kay works up the courage to ask Mitch about last night. To her relief, he assures her that nothing happened. They just talked. As he continues searching, Mitch finds a bottle of sunscreen and tosses it to Kay, who throws it toward their friends in the car. While they sit in silence, reflecting on the chaos of the night before, a chilling realization sinks in. The rest of the partygoers didn't just leave. They were devoured by the sand. The weight of the truth is too much. Everyone breaks down in tears, except for Gilbert. Instead of crying, he starts panicking as the relentless sun scorches his exposed skin. Jonah quickly tosses him the sunscreen, and for now, it's enough to calm him down. At that moment, Kaylee spots the goo ball from last night, now dried up and split in two. Ronnie takes a closer look and realizes something unsettling. It doesn't just look broken, it looks like it hatched. That means it wasn't a ball at all. It was an egg, and whatever came out of it is the thing hiding in the sand, devouring people. Since it was only born last night, Kay figures it can't be too big yet. To test its reach, she grabs a sausage from the cooler and tosses it onto the sand. The group watches as thin strands instantly emerge, wrapping around the meat and pulling it underground. Curious, they throw a few more sausages in different spots, trying to gauge how far the creature can reach, but the strands keep appearing. Suddenly, a bird swoops down, attempting to snatch a piece, only to be caught in the same way, dragged under in seconds. They toss the last sausage in another direction, but this time, nothing happens. The monster doesn't react. That must be the safe zone. The problem is, it's not far enough to make getting there easy. The risk is still dangerously high. The group starts arguing again, tensions running high. Ronnie points out something strange. They haven't seen a single car or person pass by in hours. Something about this situation isn't right. Refusing to give up, Jonah searches the car and finds 2 surfboards in the back. He tosses them onto the sand, watching closely. The monster doesn't react. Testing his theory, he steps onto one of the boards and stays safe. Now, he can move by alternating between them, creating a path without touching the sand. As he carefully inches forward, Kay warns him to keep his hands away from the ground. Jonah suddenly stops and turns to the group. He has something to say. Instead of focusing on the escape, he calls out everyone who cheated the night before. The others argue that now isn't the time for this conversation. Survival comes first. Ignoring them, Jonah keeps moving. When he reaches a bench, one of the surfboards shifts under him, nearly making him fall. At the last second, he grips onto the bench, saving himself. But the others notice something disturbing. The strands beneath the sand are slowly dragging the boards away. They shout for him to come back, but Jonah insists he can still make it. Without warning, the strands shoot up and brush against his stomach. Instinctively, Jonah leaps forward, barely making it onto the top of the table. The thin tendrils left painful, bleeding cuts across his skin. As he lies there, dizziness takes over, and a piercing ringing fills his ears, drowning out the worried voices of his friends. After a few moments of resting, Jonah snaps back to reality, groaning about the pain. He describes the sensation as if he's been stung by 1,000 jellyfish. Since his wounds aren't too deep, Ronnie realizes something. The strands must be poisonous. Taking a deep breath, Jonah forces himself to move. He spots a bag on the bench and rummages through it, finding some food. When he accidentally drops a banana, he notices something strange. It doesn't sink. Curious, he picks it up, then lowers it back down near the sand. The monster's strands immediately emerge, but only from the regular sand, not from the area where the bonfire was. Testing his theory, Jonah jumps off the bench and lands in the same burnt spot. Nothing happens. That confirms it. The creature avoids fire. Feeling victorious, Jonah eats the banana. But the moment he swallows, panic sets in. His stomach wounds start oozing pus. Kaylee quickly steps in, speaking to him in a calm but firm voice. She tells him to stay focused and check the bag again. Inside, he finds some drinks and starts tossing them to his friends, trying to help. Just as he's throwing the last can, the bench beneath him creaks and cracks. He slips, and his wounds worsen, pus dripping before bursting open into fresh, bleeding cuts. A sharp scream rips from his throat as pain surges through his body. With sheer determination, Jonah fights through the agony and scrambles back onto the table. At the same time, they all notice something terrifying. The surfboards are shifting on their own. The monster is taking them away, eliminating any chance of escape. Gilbert brings up the phones, and Ronnie starts pulling at the back seats to access the trunk, but they won't budge. Determined, she decides to climb onto the bumper instead, but the metal is scorching. She covers it with a towel before attempting to move. Before going further, Ronnie turns to Shanda, telling her about a letter she wrote for her mom in her notebook. She asks Shanda to deliver it if anything happens to her. Holding Shanda's hands for reassurance, Ronnie carefully crawls onto the trunk and lowers herself onto the bumper. Meanwhile, Kaylee checks on the others. Jonah is still unconscious, and Gilbert is struggling with the heat, barely holding on. The metal of the barrel is pressing into his skin, making his situation even worse. Ronnie finally gets the keys into the lock and starts opening the trunk, but the lid suddenly slips. She barely manages to hold on and avoid falling. She tries again, but this time the lid swings down and hits her legs, causing her to slip and land on top of the trunk, accidentally shutting it again. Kaylee points out that the trunk is too wide for Ronnie to reach while keeping balanced. Shanda and Ronnie roll up the towel to use as a makeshift rope, but it's still too short. That's when Mitch and Kaylee remember the rescue hook inside the lifeguard stand and quickly pass it to her. As Ronnie prepares to try again, the car suddenly shakes. Thin strands from the monster have pierced the tires. Moving cautiously, she finally manages to pry the trunk open. But just as she reaches for the phones, a loud honk startles her. A car appears on the beach. The sudden noise makes Ronnie slip, and the trunk slams shut, crushing her fingers. She screams in pain as the others frantically wave their arms, trying to get the driver's attention. The vehicle pulls up near the table, and Officer Alex from the beach patrol lowers his window, casually announcing, "The beach is closed." The friends frantically explain what's happening, but Alex doesn't take them seriously. He assumes they're just drunk and dismisses their warnings. Ignoring their pleas, he steps out of his car, and nothing happens. Casually, Alex walks across the beach, checking on both Jonah and Gilbert. The monster's strands attempt to grab his feet but can't get through his boots. Oblivious to the danger, he mocks Gilbert for his size and the prank drawing still on his face. When he tries pulling him out of the barrel, he fails. Moving on, Alex checks on Ronnie but can't free her fingers from the trunk either. His patience running thin, Alex starts ridiculing everyone, suggesting they must have taken something illegal. Frustrated, Kay snaps at him, calling him useless. Annoyed, Alex heads to the lifeguard stand where he starts arguing with Kay and Mitch, still refusing to believe their story. When they won't come down, he threatens to use force. Reaching for his pepper spray, he accidentally drops his car keys. As soon as he bends down to pick them up, the strands strike. His hand gets stuck. Panicking, Alex tries to pull free, but Kay shouts at him to use the pepper spray. Desperate, he sprays the strands, and to everyone's shock, they immediately retreat underground, releasing him. But the damage is done. When Alex looks at his arm, he screams in horror. A chunk of it has already been eaten away. Before he can react, the monster pulls him down. He collapses onto the sand, struggling against its grip. Using the ramp on the lifeguard stand, Ronnie moves just close enough to grab the pepper spray, but instead of helping, she watches coldly as Alex sinks to his death. Seeing what happened, Mitch gets an idea. He puts on his flip-flops and asks Shanda for her towels, planning to wrap them around his feet for protection. He catches the first towel easily, but as he reaches for the second, disaster strikes. The railing suddenly gives way, and he falls straight onto the sand. The monster reacts instantly. Strands surge toward him, latching onto every part of his body they can reach. His friends can only watch in horror as Mitch slowly bleeds out, his body sinking deeper and deeper into the sand until he's completely gone. The strands completely consume Mitch, even dissolving his shirt as they push through his eyes and mouth. Once his body is gone, only a bloody stain remains where he died. Afterward, Kaylee notices the monster shifting the broken railing and quickly tells Shanda to grab it. She then breaks more of the railing and tosses it to her, along with a towel. Taking a risk, Kaylee jumps off the lifeguard stand, luckily landing on the car. Out of nowhere, Kay punches Shanda for getting too close to her boyfriend. The girls decide they're even now. Meanwhile, Jonah apologizes to Kay for what happened, and they exchange "I love you." Using the last of his strength, Gilbert twists inside the barrel to communicate better with his friends. The strands continue reaching for the blood dripping from his wounds. Meanwhile, Kaylee and Shanda pull Ronnie's body, managing to free her hand before quickly wrapping it with a towel. They use the railing pieces to create a makeshift bridge, allowing Shanda to cross while explaining that nothing actually happened between her and Jonah. Once she makes it safely to the table, Kay follows, reaching her boyfriend. Ronnie is next, but as she moves, she notices blood dripping from her towel. The distraction causes her to lose balance and fall. Acting fast, Kay sprays the pepper spray to buy time. At first, it seems like Ronnie is okay as Kay grabs her arm. But before she can pull her up, the monster's strands latch onto Ronnie's other arm, dragging her under. The group can only watch in horror as she disappears beneath the sand. Unnoticed by the others, the strands are creeping up Gilbert's barrel. Desperate, Shanda decides to try Mitch's plan. Wrapping towels around her feet, she sprints as fast as she can and manages to reach the top of Alex's car. Suddenly, Gilbert feels the barrel moving and panics, but it only lasts for a few seconds. Just as he sighs in relief, he coughs up blood. Moments later, massive tentacles burst out of the can, wrapping around his body and pulling him under, leaving behind nothing but a blood-stained spot in the sand. Then, the monster violently shakes Alex's car. Shanda loses her balance, slamming her head against the hood and falling unconscious. Several hours pass and night falls. When Shanda finally wakes up, she spots a raft strapped to the top of the car. She tosses it onto the sand, using it to reach the table and help Kay carry Jonah into the vehicle. Suddenly, the ground trembles, and Kay stumbles backward onto the raft. As she tries to return to the car, a glowing tentacle erupts from the sand and lunges at her. She dodges just in time, but the force of the attack slams the car door shut before the tentacle vanishes. Thinking fast, Kay climbs onto the car and grabs a gas can, but the tentacle strikes again, destroying it and covering itself in fuel. Grabbing a second can, she quickly pours gasoline onto the sand. Then, pulling matches from her pocket, she waits. As soon as the tentacle lunges again, Kaylee strikes the match and tosses it, setting the entire creature ablaze. The monster thrashes and screeches in agony while Shanda flings the car door open, allowing Kay to jump inside. The creature, now furious, tries to pry the door open, but the girls fight to keep it shut. It then uses its massive strands to slam against the car, but when nothing works, it finally retreats. Breathing heavily, the girls take a moment to collect themselves until they realize Jonah isn't moving. He's gone. Overwhelmed with grief, they break down in tears. The next morning, a surfer spots the car and knocks on the window, waking them up. As they step outside, they cautiously walk on the sand. Nothing happens. The monster is gone. As Kay and Shanda start heading home, far out in the ocean, the creature swims through the waves, searching for a new beach and fresh victims. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss more videos like this. Thanks for watching.